Hey, everybody. Welcome to the Bark Night Podcast. I am your host, Patrick Bark,
And I'm Dan.
and today we have episode 27 for you. So, we are doing a Korean folk horror double feature today, and
hmm
it is us discussing The Wailing and Exhuma.
Yes,
So,
sir.
first off, if you are listening to this, wherever you're listening, do me a favor and subscribe or follow or wherever you are watching or listening to this. Give me a like if you're on Spotify. Give me a 5-star rating, whatever you can.
I think so. I think it's worth it.
I can use all the help I can get right now. So let's talk about this. So I wanted to start the episode off talking about folk horror in general. So
Right.
let's start there and kind of talk about what it is, what some of the important elements of it are. You know, same sort of thing we did with Gothic horror a couple episodes ago.
Right. And I think folk horror can be considered like kind of a cousin to gothic horror in a lot of ways. Like they kind of have the same like rural setting. It's a big thing for folk horror, which I mean gothic can be cities too, but I think that is the main thing about like folk horror is that it's like a rural setting and there's superstitions of the area involved in the movie.
Right. Yeah, I think you're spot on there. And kind of to take it back to the Wolfman that we talked about a couple episodes ago, that has a lot
Right.
of elements of both gothic horror and folk horror because you're dealing with the folklore of werewolves, but you're also dealing with the tragedy and the atmosphere of gothic horror. So that's a really good example of that.
Right, and then even in the beginning of the Wolfman, where there's that text talking about the curse of the area, or how it went back to the indigenous people, like that, the same idea,
Yeah.
exactly what you just said.
Yeah. So folk horror in general is for our audience here. It is a subgenre of horror. So horror has all those little subgenres
And
within
they
it.
really do.
Slashers, serial killers, mysteries, thrillers, all
Monster,
these things.
yeah,
Yeah. Creature
animal
features.
attacks, yep.
So it's a subgenre under horror, and it deals with and focuses on the use of folklore
hmm
and myths,
Yep.
legends, and a big part of it is always like the use of different cultures or
hmm
history, traditions, those sorts of
Right.
things. So that's where a lot of these go, and they deal with the history of a region, maybe, you
hmm
know.
Yep. Absolutely.
So Dan, what do you think makes good folk horror?
So I think, from what in my experience, I feel like it's almost like I don't want to say it has to be like of a certain like time period, but the rule aspect, like I don't know how to phrase this, but like it can't be like set in like a city. You know what I mean? I feel like you can't have like a movie where like a banshee walks into like downtown Manhattan. You know, it has to be set. You know what I mean? It has to be set like in kind of like a rural area. I think that's a big part of it. And then I think you need to have at least like one or two scenes of someone doing just doing like an unnecessary exposition dump, just telling you like, well, back in 1902, the werewolf
Right.
showed up. You know, I
Or
think
the
that those
reading
are
of an old passage
right.
or
Yeah,
something.
and it's expected and it's cliche, but you need it. I think like you kind of need it in like, those types of movies.
Yeah, and that's why there's almost like that like you say cliche, but like the trope of like the expert that they have to
hmm
bring in
Right.
inevitably to explain exactly what is going on and how it deals with the history of the town. It's Willem Dafoe's character in Nosferatu
Right.
or in some historian or the historical society. Like
Right. Yeah.
there's always somebody they find that
Like
is explaining all these things.
in both our movies that we're going to talk about today, there's a shaman that kind of shows up and lets you know what's going on.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree with everything you said. I think that it another focus of it is a utilization of atmosphere
Yes,
with
absolutely. I have that down
uh,
here.
Yeah, like using isolation.
Hmm.
I think that's a big thing with this, and I think that's why using sort of like isolated villages, forests, and the use of nature. I
Right.
think I think that's why the like what you said with using like small towns and whatnot. I think that the isolation piece of it is
Eh,
is what really helps support that. The isolation, the fear, the dread.
right. A great example of that is The Witch, the Robert Eggers movie we brought up a few times. That's perfect. Isolated family in the woods.
Yep.
That's about as folky as you can get, I think.
Yeah, yeah, that's a perfect example because it's a family hundreds of years ago that makes the choice to move out to the middle of nowhere. There's nobody in sight. There's nobody to hear them scream. There's
Hmm.
nobody to help them. So they're isolated, and the fear, the paranoia, all those
Right.
things are building up, and it's supported by the folklore of
Hmm.
the witch
Right.
being there in those forests.
Exactly. Yeah. So I think that's just a great example of what we're talking about. If you haven't seen The Witch, I think we've pretty much said on this show a couple of times that you should go give it a watch.
Yeah.
And it's I can't think of a better example offhand, but that's the one that popped in my mind, and I made sure to write down.
Yeah, yeah. I think probably the most important thing is that the creator of whatever the movie is understands the folklore and the culture that they're depicting.
Right.
And I think, to take The Witch and to take Robert Eggers, for example, he makes sure to do a ton of research for all of these movies, using the Old English style of speech,
Hmm.
using the props that are around it, the house set up the way it would be. I
Hmm.
don't think every movie needs to go as granular as he does, but
Right.
the further you go, the better and
Right.
more authentic it feels.
And he's all about that. We've discussed that already, but yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely.
So I figured I'd throw a couple examples out here of movies that are good examples of folklore other than the ones we're talking about today.
Right.
I had The Witch
Hmm.
on my list. I also had Midsommar
Okay.
and The Wicker Man.
Okay.
I think
Cool.
those are both
The
good
Nick Cage one.
examples of this.
I
I will say I do love the Nick Cage version, but
know
I mean I think that I was speaking strictly to the '70s version, but
yeah.
both of those are dealing with old style cultures that have survived. So they're in the current era, but they're cultures and traditions and legends that have sort of like lived up into our era.
Right.
But
Right.
that's what they're all about is the folklore of that region.
Right. Yeah. Maybe like even I put down maybe M. Night Shyamalan's The Village, kind of like a reverse kind of folklore type thing, where like they were a village who hid themselves from the modern society. Is kind of like a twist on that whole thing.
Yeah, and in that movie they develop their own folklore.
Hmm.
So that's what the whole
They
movie is
they stay in
about
the
is
woods.
these
Yeah.
monsters that are out there in the woods. So they've created this folklore of their region
Hmm.
that is yeah, that's a good example. A couple other ones I had The Ritual.
I okay. Yep. Yep. Okay. I remember now.
I think that's a good example,
Hmm.
and even the Blair Witch Project I think is a good
All right.
example.
Yep. I didn't think of that one, but that is.
Old example, it's a oldie but a goodie.
I mean, those kids go around the town, and the whole town explains to them like the woods are haunted. There's the witch in there. Don't go in the woods. That
Yeah.
is that is yeah, absolutely.
I would even go as far as to say like the movie Ravenous has some folk horror elements to it as well.
I need to watch that again. It's been a while.
It's good. It is dealing with a different type of history. It's like colonialism,
Hmm.
and dealing with them creating all these colonies everywhere, and there's the wars in the U.S. going on, but they're isolated out in the middle of nowhere, and they're dealing with cannibals.
Hmm.
And I think they've developed some sort of folklore around the cannibalism and how it's developed from like Native American legends and stealing the power from the
Right.
person that you're eating and things like that. And I don't know, it's a solid movie. I do need to watch it again as well. But
Yeah. Guy Pearce, right?
Guy Pearce
Yep.
and the dude from 28 Weeks Later, Robert Carlyle.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah.
David Arquette.
Quality one there. David Arquette. Yeah, he's
That's
there
right.
too.
I remember him from the
Jeremy
trailer.
Davies is in it too.
Remember David Arquette in the trailer where he just screams, "He was licking me."
No, that was Jeremy Davies.
Was it? Oh, okay.
Yeah.
I misremembered that then. I thought it was David Arquette.
No, he's in it though. I do recall.
Right. My bad. That's just one of those false memories that pops in your head.
Yeah. He was licking me.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. All right. So that's enough background on what folk horror is. So let's get into the nitty gritty here. So the way we developed this episode is that I wrote down a list of all these different subgenres and picked folk horror, and then threw the ball over to Dan and was basically like, hey, I picked the genre, you pick the first movie, and then I'll pick a movie that goes along with it. And so Dan picked The Wailing.
I did.
And he has seen it, but I have not. Or I had not. I have now. And then when I saw that, I was like, oh, you know what? I think that Exhuma would support this very well. They're both from South Korea. They both deal with folk horror elements. And I know that Dan hadn't seen Exhuma. So I was like, all right, well, this will give him a reason to watch that. And now that I've watched them both, I honestly am so happy we did it this way, because I didn't even neither of us having seen either of them, I had no idea that they were so similar,
right?
In their themes.
Yeah, completely agree.
Shamanism, of like all
spirits
demons, of the ceremonies that they do in both. They really take. You can tell that Exhuma probably took a lot of influence from The Wailing.
Right.
So I was pumped when I watched The Wailing and was like, "Oh my god, this is like perfect for this double feature right now."
Right. Yeah. Yeah, I was glad too. Like I was happy to go back and watch The Wailing again. And then, as you said, watching Exhuma, I'm like, this could be like by the same director. Like they're very similar movies.
I had to check.
Yeah.
So how we're gonna do this is we're gonna talk about The Wailing first, and then we're gonna talk about Exhuma, and then maybe we'll talk about some things that are more similar between them, and we'll probably bounce a little bit between some of those while we talk about it. But yeah, I'm going to pass the ball over to Dan to introduce The Wailing and kind of lead the conversation for that movie, with this being his pick.
Right. So yeah, as Pat said, my pick was The Wailing from 2016, directed by Na Hung Jin. If I said that wrong, I apologize. Obviously a Korean director who has a career that started out in 2008 with a movie called The Chaser, which I guess is more of like an action thriller that's supposed to be very good. I haven't seen it. The only movie by him that I've seen is The Wailing. He put the movie out in 2016. It was critically lauded, and it's just one of those movies, like when it came out, you hear about it in like the horror circles about how good this movie is. So obviously it's not in English, so some people find that a turnoff that there's not like obviously English. And I was looking into it, and actually one thing that he has on his record is in 2010 he did a movie called The Yellow Sea, and it was the first collaboration between a Korean film studio and a Hollywood film studio. They collaborated with Fox to put that movie out, which I guess I'll have to catch sometime too, because I haven't seen that, but I just thought that was a kind of a cool little tidbit.
Yeah. The Yellow Sea, you said?
The Yellow Sea, yeah. Yeah, I don't know anything about it, but I digress. The Wailing is a story about a cop, kind of a mess up, kind of a screw up. Not really like the best officer, kind of cowardly, doesn't really do his job well. His captain is all over him for the first part of the movie. And he's also not the best person. He's kind of an adulterer, but a series of mysterious deaths start popping up in his hometown, and he tries to eventually he notices a rash on the people who are causing these horrific murders, and he investigates it, and as he's investigating, he notices that his daughter has started to show symptoms of it too. And as the movie continues, you find out more and more about what's happening with the rash, and how there's a Japanese man who's come to the town, and when he came to the town, this whole like murderous epidemic has started. And it has a lot of different like elements into it, but basically at the heart of it, it's a possession movie. He's investigating these crimes, these murders, these horrible acts, and he's seeing connections between the Japanese man and the time frame, and he investigates him. He goes to his house. His police partner brings in his I think it's his nephew, who's a priest of like Christianity. So there's elements of that which I didn't expect in there. Kind of like a police procedural mixed with a possession movie with some tinges of like there's like almost like zombie like people when they get possessed, they become murderous and almost ravenous to an extent. And
Yeah.
yeah, I think that's the general breakdown of what's going on in the movie.
All right.
So the main actor in the movie is called Kwak Do Won, plays Jung Gu, who is the main character, and he's fantastic in it. He gives off sort of vibes like Train to Busan.
Yep.
Like that's one of my favorite movies. The guy who was whose name is escaping me now, but like he's not the main character, but he's like kind of like the second main actor in that movie. I was getting the same kind of vibes from him as this guy, and I thought he did a great job. The girl who played his daughter was also very good, because there's an exorcist scene, and that's a very hard scene to pull off for anyone, especially like a child actor. And I thought she was great. The budget of the movie was $6.42 million, and it earned worldwide 49.9. As I said, the movie was well received by critics. Rotten Tomatoes, it has a 99% from the critics and 82% from the fans. IMDb has it at 7.4 out of 10, which is pretty high for them, to be honest with you. Metacritic has it sitting at an 81%. And I put here some of the big influences in the movie. I think you can't watch it and not see a bit of the Exorcist DNA in there. There's a couple scenes with like upside down crosses, and I think that definitely he took the idea of the Exorcist and gave it his own spin with the Korean culture. And another big influence I saw is the effect of Japanese colonialism on Korea. Like they have this whole thing with this man potentially being a threat, and there's definitely the people of the area have a certain standoffishness towards him because of him being Japanese. And I
Yeah.
think those are two of the big plot like influences that drive the story forward.
Yeah, and what's interesting about that is that I was not aware that that was such a thing. But after I watched both of these, it's a topic in both of them, a
It
focus
is.
on colonialism and their battles and the
Mm-hmm.
feelings following that
Right.
lived on for years there and to a point still lives on today with following World War II.
Mm.
And I just wasn't aware that
No.
it was as bad as I did some reading up on it afterwards, and I was not aware that it was as bad as it was. But yeah, apparently it's pretty bad.
Same. I had really no idea, and just ignorant to it that it was that bad, and it's definitely an element in this movie for sure, and in Exhuma. What else did I put here? I put Korean folklore, ominous spirits, how they're good and bad in Korean folklore, but obviously this one focuses more on the bad. And also that there's a thing in apparently Korean folklore I found that said going to the wrong people for help leads to problems. So I think that kind of it's a it's kind of a twist in the movie. I don't want to spoil, but that shows up as well down the line.
Yeah. What is sort of interesting about all that too is this movie has a ton of twists and turns in it.
It does.
And I had read the director had said that he threw so much at the audience because he wanted you to get confused,
hmm
because his one of his influences for writing this script was that, and I apologize if you've got this in your notes and I'm about to
No,
steal your
sorry.
thunder, but it's that he had lost a bunch of people close to him within a short time period, and they were not of natural causes. And so he wanted to make a movie that is about the confusion that you feel when something like that is happening in your life, and the way you feel that you don't have control over the
hmm
situation, and that there's questions that you're going to have that there's not going to be answers to.
Right.
And so that was a big part of his inspiration for writing this the way he did, is that sometimes bad things just happen to the people that are close to you, and there's nothing you can do about it, and you don't know why it happened,
Mhm.
and it's just the way the world works.
Right. I didn't see that in my research. I wish I would have, but I did get that thing about going to the wrong people for help, so that's fun. But
Yeah,
that all makes sense because there's a scene in the movie where the guy, the main cop, asks why this is happening to his daughter, and the shaman character just says that the demon was fishing trying to find someone, and she took the bait. So that's just random happenstance, really, is what. So that goes exactly to what you're saying. So I did have a point of that
yeah,
in here.
yeah. And I caught that as well, and that was really interesting. And I thought it was a way to put it
Hmm.
to frame how demons and bad people and evil things just work that I hadn't really seen before. In the fact that making the analogy to that they're just fishing,
Yeah.
and sometimes your daughter is just who got in the way.
Yep. Yep. Which was a really cool way to do it, and I did write that down because I like that a lot. Sorry for my sniffling. It's just been apparently I'm getting a cold or something.
Yeah, that's been nonstop for a couple weeks now.
Sorry, buddy. Sorry.
that's that's
Eventually I'll
okay.
be healthy. It's the
Yeah,
weather.
eventually you'll get less snow and more sunlight over there.
Oh God, I would love to see the sun more than like 2 hours a week. But yeah, man, that's basically what I have for the notes on the movie without getting too far into like the ending.
Okay.
Yeah, big fan of it. I think it's something that everyone, especially if they have an interest in the horror movie and can deal with the subtitles, I think you need to check it out. I think it's definitely a worth watch.
Yeah, so I will say I didn't really know what to expect from this, but I thought it was going to be, I don't know, I guess a lot more like brutal
Right.
than it actually is. And I mean it does have some parts that are they're not brutal, but they're like kind of, sort of like gut punches.
Hmm.
It's got a couple gut punches in it, but it's not like overly brutal. And I think that's because I've watched a lot of Korean movies, and they have had a habit to be especially brutal sometimes.
Right.
Like I watched like the I think it's called the Vengeance trilogy, which is like Sympathy for Lady Vengeance and Old Boy and
Okay.
something Mr. Vengeance or something. And those movies were absolutely brutal. If
Yeah.
you've seen Old Boy, you know what I
I
mean.
have seen Old Boy. I do. Yeah.
The other two are
Sorry.
good too, and they're brutal in different ways. But
Yeah.
yeah, so like watching too many movies like that, and you're just like, oh man, if the Wailing is anything like this.
Mhm. I mean, there's violence in the movie, but you're right. A lot of it happens off screen. Like we see the
Yeah,
aftermath of
yeah,
the
exactly.
attacks. Yeah.
And it's done in a really cool way. What I thought was interesting about this too is that at the beginning it kind of has like it plays around with what the tone of the movie is, which
Hmm.
I didn't expect. Where like there's some comedic scenes going on,
Right.
and you're like, oh, is this like a horror comedy?
And then
And
no,
partway through the movie, it just completely abandons the comedy, and you're like, okay, well that's
no.
gone now.
Yeah, like I said, the police chief or whatever, I don't know what he is over there, and like he's like giving a crap about like how bad of an officer he is and everything, and then all of a sudden the character just stops being in the movie because it's not that tone anymore.
Yeah. For anybody out there that's considering watching this, I highly recommend it. When I was looking around like Reddit and looking at reviews and whatnot, a lot of people feel very strongly about this probably being the best Korean folk horror movie out there. I saw a couple subreddits where people are basically asking like, "Hey, I loved The Wailing. What else is out there like this?" And everybody's like,
Mm.
"There's nothing out there
Yeah.
that's like this." But a lot of people did recommend Exhuma, which is very good in its own way. And there was a couple other ones that I did see thrown out there that I was like, "Oh, I got to check these ones out," because I really liked the way that it plays with all those ideas.
Mm.
And I love the way they're playing with like shamanism and their use of their ceremonies, and they're building their own sort of lore that is based in reality,
Mm.
because
Right.
like shamans are real and their beliefs a vast portion of the lore that's in these movies is based on real things, real
Right.
beliefs.
Mm.
So,
Completely. Yep.
all right, so just for the sake of doing it, because I feel like I need to, let's take a spoiler section here and talk about and like really dig into the end
Right.
and kind of talk about what exactly happens here at the end of this movie. So if anybody doesn't want to get spoiled on this movie, we're only going to spend a couple minutes on it. Walk away or use the chapters if you're on YouTube or whatever, and just skip ahead to the Exhuma section because we're going to take a couple moments here to just spoil exactly what's going on with this movie, because I really do think that it's worth seeing this without big pieces of the plot being spoiled for you. But like, yeah, let's talk about it.
Right. So the first main red herring is like when after the shaman does the ritual and it goes wrong and he flees, and then locusts attack him or in the car, and he comes back and he calls the main character, the police officer, and tells him so I haven't mentioned her at all, have I? The whole movie there's this woman in white kind of around, and she's not really a main character. She's just kind of there to do like an exposition dump every now and then, and you know she's there, but you don't think much of her. And then all of a sudden, when the shaman's coming back to the town, he calls the cop and is like, "Hey, it's this woman in white. It's not the Japanese man who's the problem." And so then that's the first like big like kind of like, oh crap, it's her, right? The whole
Yeah.
movie, because like the Japanese man's portrayed not evil to that point. He's almost portrayed sympathetically. Like he's crying, he's running, he's like he doesn't look like he's trying to hurt anyone really. Like he does some creepy things, but nothing overtly like bad, right?
Yeah.
And then like the shaman says that he's like me. He's a shaman from Japan. He's trying to trying to get rid of this evil spirit. So you think that is what's going on, but it's not. It's a double twist where the shaman has been either corrupted by the Japanese man or just was always on his side. It's not exactly clear, but the Japanese man is straight a demon. And
I gathered from it that he's been on his side the entire time
did you? I was
because
wondering.
he had those pictures in the back of his car.
See, that's the thing. That's the thing that makes me think that he was too, because the guy there's a scene where the cop asked him where his photos were because they found his shrine. They saw the photos. They asked him where it was, and he said he burnt them, but obviously he hadn't because they were in this box in the shaman's car.
Yeah,
So you think
that led me to believe that he has been there the whole time. Also, there were like pieces of it looked like the ritual that he did on the young girl. It looked like it had been done at least one of the other houses.
Yep, with the well full of bodies.
Yeah.
Yep.
What I had gathered is that the reason the director throws so much at you when all this is happening. But what I gathered is that the woman in white, so one of the things I was wondering is like, why would she tell him that these other families could have avoided all of this if they had, she tells the main character that the other families would have lived if they had talked to a shaman and done the ceremony. But she knows that the shaman is evil.
Right.
But I think that she's doing that because she wants to put this trap out there for him. Right?
Right. I can see that. That's also to my point where I thought maybe there was a point where he got corrupted, but it just doesn't hold water, the corrupted thing, because you're right. There was the other scene that had the exorcism that obviously didn't go well, and then the whole thing with the photos. Yeah, and then like I mean, she makes him like bleed and vomit and run from the scene in the one scene. So obviously she's not powerless. So yeah, it is a bit odd how that's played out, but yeah.
I don't think he's like corrupted, like possessed or anything like that. I really just think he's in it for the money. I think that's it. And when he leaves, the locusts are from the demon dude, right?
Yeah.
He's like, hey, no, not so fast. Get back there.
Get back here. Yeah. that makes more sense. And I had that written down. Like there's a couple different ways to do it, but talking it out with you, it does seem
like there's so many different ways this can go, and it all feeds into like the confusion of it. Like they throw a ton at you, and they don't explain a lot of it.
No. But yeah,
But
so
I gathered that the woman in white is like a deity that's like protecting the village,
yeah,
right?
at
But
least a
she
spirit
can't
protecting the
do that
village. Yeah,
much, and she keeps failing to protect all of them
yeah,
because for whatever reason, each one of the families, it what it seemed like to me is very specific circumstances have to happen for her to actually be able to protect anybody, and there's many people she just can't protect from this evil, right?
right. And then the final scene where the nephew goes, the priest of like Christianity goes to the cave and finds the man, and then he starts taking photos of him, and he changes, like his fingernails
Yeah.
change, and oh, that's such a cool scene. And I'm like,
That
okay,
that scene, I was just like, oh man, they went for it right here. They just,
yeah, yeah,
that was something else. And I had actually seen that screenshot of him before, but I didn't know it was for this movie.
right,
And so that was once I saw it, I was like, oh shit, this is it.
yeah,
And like, yeah, that was really good. That the way they did that was really
right,
good.
right.
And he's pretty
Yeah,
pretty terrifying looking.
he really is, and like that priest is done so, like, because he's taking photos of him. Like, they don't have to show us what happens; we know what happens.
Yeah. I didn't get what the deal with the photos was though. Did you?
No.
I'll have to look into that afterwards. But like, yeah, I didn't quite understand what that was. There's beliefs in the role that photography plays in your spirituality in a lot of different
Mhm.
religions. So maybe it's something with that, but I didn't quite gather it. I will say one thing I thought is I don't think he could have saved his wife or his mother-in-law no matter what, right?
That's
Like
what I
they were
got
going
from
to
it.
die either way.
Yeah,
But if he had waited, he would have saved his life and his daughter's life, but I don't think he could have saved the other two no matter what.
I think it was mainly at that point her trying to save him. I don't think, like, the daughter. I mean, obviously, was the perpetrator of the deaths of the grandmother and the mother. But yeah, I think she was trying to, the whole, like, if you leave now, your whole family will die. I think that was her
Right.
trying to be like, like, this is the only chance you have, pretty much. I
Yeah.
agree with you though. Like, I don't think there's any saving the rest of them.
Yeah, I think that and him going there, you saw when he like ran through the thing, like the thing that was put up like shriveled. I got the vibe that I did see at one of the houses, like I think the first house at the beginning.
Right,
So I'm wondering if this whole thing has happened before, multiple times, and just nobody ever listens to her, basically,
right,
right?
yeah,
And so the trap that she sets every time doesn't get
doesn't work.
fulfilled, and everybody dies each time.
Right,
Gut
next,
punch.
gut punch.
All right. I think that's good for the whaling.
I agree, buddy.
All right,
Now,
let's move on to the next one.
I will say, the puppy being here kind of interrupted me a lot with watching Exhuma on Saturday. So I might be not the best with the notes, but I definitely I finished the movie. I saw the whole thing. So
Well, I have watched it
can you hear him, by
three
the way?
times now. No, well, yeah, a little bit, but
It's not that's not bad though.
no, it's fine.
Okay, okay.
I apologize, audience. Dan has a little puppy there, and this is what puppies do.
Yeah,
We have seen it at my house before too, in episodes past. So, like, yeah, okay. So,
yeah.
Exhuma.
Exhuma.
Exhuma is my pick for the Korean folk horror double feature. It is from last year, 2024. It's written and directed by Jang Jae-hoon. I think that's how you say his name. I apologize if I did get that wrong. I'm not going to try anybody else's name. But this movie has a lot of the same themes as The Wailing. So the general synopsis for this movie is that a team of geomancers and shaman work together with a wealthy family to attempt to break a curse that is on the family. So they're attempting to break this curse by exhuming an old family member's grave. And the geomancers and the shaman quickly realize that there's more to this grave than meets the eye, and they attempt to use their collective skills to battle this ancient evil that they have released.
Mhm.
So that is about all you need to know going in. I will say that this one, I think, really is just like the other one. You're best not knowing too much going in. And I mean, unless you're going to go do a bunch of research on geomancers and shaman, but that could definitely help.
Good.
But in the way of exposition dumps, there's a whole exposition dump at the beginning of this
Right.
movie where they're kind of giving you a rundown of what geomancers are and shaman and their spiritual beliefs and all of this. And they're almost building a world around it too, where like there's the whole thing with them wanting to bury people in proper ground. That's a big
Right.
part of this movie is people being the main geomancer's job is to evaluate the earth that is being evaluated for a burial and making sure it's fit for somebody to be buried in. And what we find
Right.
with this specific grave is that it was not fit to be buried in.
No.
And they established so much in those first like two scenes between like the girl and she's talking through her beliefs and what she does and everything, and she's like, now everybody knows about monsters and things like that. So they're kind of building a world where everybody believes in all of these things, and like it's that's how it seems. It's like everybody, like she says, like everybody's aware of monsters and
Right.
whatnot, And then they do a ton of lore building in that scene where they're exhuming the one grave, So I've watched this movie 3 times now. And I truly think I understand the entire movie having seen it the 3rd time. The 2nd time, there was a significant jump. The first time I watched it, I was truly so confused.
Right.
Did you feel that way when you watched it?
Right. And I think, like as I said earlier, I blame it on the puppy, but I think it's because there was a lot to take in. As you said, those first couple scenes lays out so much, and if you don't like take that all in, it does. There's certain disconnects later on. Not
You
saying
are going to be lost.
yes. Not saying it's a bad time. Like I still had a great time watching. The atmosphere is great. The cinematography is fantastic. Like I said, it could have been the same people who did the Wailing. Like it looks so similar to that. I think.
They're
And
both absolutely beautiful films. Yeah.
yes, absolutely. And so I still had a good time with it, but there's definitely some parts where I'm like, I don't remember them mentioning that before. But let's roll with it.
Yeah. Well, and I think I told you this before that like the first time I watched this, I had like a couple beers in me, and it was not the movie for me to be watching like late on a Friday night.
Right.
And so the next day I was thinking about it. I was like, I don't really know what that movie was even about. Like I didn't finish it my first time through. I was like, all right, this isn't the time for this.
Yeah.
So then I gave it another shot like a week or 2 later, and I was like, okay, I get this now. If any of the viewers feel like you need to, you're a couple scenes in and you just need to restart it, I highly recommend you just
Restarting
do
it. Yeah.
Yeah, because those first 2 scenes really do so much to explain exactly what's going on in the movie that it really does you seeing those scenes twice might be hugely beneficial. But yeah, so that's generally at a high level what that movie is about. It is about this team of geomancers and shaman working against this ancient evil, and you figure out as the movie progresses what the ancient evil is.
Mm-hmm.
So from a cast and acting perspective, I think everybody in it
really
is
good.
absolutely fantastic. Everybody on this team, each one of those actors is great, and I was really happy with all of them. I would love to see a sequel with this team again,
That'd be fun. Yeah, completely agree. Specifically marked down that the main female protagonist was quite good. I don't know her name in the movie, but she was very good.
Yep. She does a ceremony not long into the movie, maybe 30, 35 minutes in, that is absolutely beautiful. That whole scene is unbelievably good. I was surprised. So that was another thing. I was like, oh, look, another ceremony in the Wailing.
Right.
This is great. And I saw, so for this one, I saw that the director had based a big portion of this on the fact that he had seen a shaman do a ceremony once as a child, and it really like affected him.
My
And
bad.
so he wanted to include one here. And the two actors there actually studied shamanism to prepare for their roles, and apparently the ceremony that they do in it is a real ceremony.
Really?
From like each piece of it is apparently exactly how a shaman would do it. And I thought that was very cool. There was one on set overseeing it, but they
Mhm.
also studied it too.
That is really cool.
Yeah.
You gotta appreciate stuff like that. Like going the extra mile really shows up in the product instead of just like,
Yeah.
"Yeah, I'm Mike Wahlberg. I fly a plane."
Yeah.
Sorry
So
about
for
that.
the budget of this movie,
Yeah.
we have $11 million it cost to make this movie, and it made $80 million at the global box office.
Nice.
So with numbers like that, I wouldn't be surprised if we saw a sequel to that. And I would really love to see one because I was really enjoying the world building that they were doing, and the whole team I think is great. So from a review perspective, we have a 6.9 out of 10 on IMDb. On Rotten Tomatoes, our critics had 95% fresh and our audience had 86% fresh. So they all loved it. Some of the influences on this is obviously the geomancers and the shaman and a lot of the beliefs revolving around those, but also it's the real history once again between South Korea and Japan in World
Right.
War II. And one of the things I had seen was that this whole story that they tell in this movie about those metal poles
Mhm.
that are stabbed into the ground, that's a real thing.
I didn't know that. That's cool.
So in the movie, there's this whole piece about the fox split the spine of the tiger,
Hmm.
and they talk about these metal spikes that have been jammed in the ground around Korea by the Japanese. So this is a real thing, and they stuck these in the ground where the energy of the land flows, and these metal rods serve to block Korea's land energy, which would sap their strength, energy, prosperity, and fortune. And what I had found is that to this day, Japan has not told them where all these metal rods have been installed in the ground. There are literally still people around Korea looking for these things.
Jesus.
Yeah, it's crazy.
Spiteful.
Yeah. And that was a long time ago. And you have to imagine that they know, right?
Yeah.
They
Well, they
definitely
know.
know.
So there's a map somewhere with them on it. There has
Right.
to be.
So that I thought that was a really interesting aspect of
Yeah.
this movie that wasn't that I just wasn't at all aware of is the history behind that. So yeah, I thought that was really cool. But Dan, I want to hear a little bit out of you here. What did you think about this movie, other than your areas where you're confused, obviously?
All right. So, as I said, the atmosphere is great. The cinematography, beautiful. We've already touched on that. I thought the chapter breakdown the movie had in it would help in a future like rewatch. I thought it was a bit of a slow burn, but not like crazy, like a crazy slow burn. Like there's always something going on. Which just over two hours this movie is. It held my attention when I wasn't dealing with a dog. But yeah, I put that in there, and then I put a couple scene, well, at least one scene that I thought really was super tense. But I don't want to steal your thunder to see if you want to talk about it at some point.
Um, what scene? I don't know what scene you're talking about.
With the baby and the spirit going after the baby in the U.S. and
Oh yeah,
yeah, and they're trying to burn the casket, get the okay to burn the casket, and like there's a spirit standing over a baby and it's slowly like reaching into it. I thought that scene was really fantastic, and that was my stand. That's the one that stuck with me the most after watching the movie.
yeah, yeah. That was a really good one. I'm telling you that ceremony scene for me
Yeah,
is the
that's
one.
really good. You're right.
But there were a lot of scenes, and what I really found interesting is that there's almost like two movies here, right?
Right.
And I noticed that in both cases of both of these movies is like there's there's a piece where you almost think it's the end of the movie, but it's really only the halfway point.
Right.
And it's so like it's almost like a false ending,
Right.
in both of these. And I thought that was a really interesting aspect of it, because after the false ending in this one, this movie really takes off, right?
Right.
Where you figure out, like, it's almost like if you were watching TV, there's a ghost that they're dealing with in part of this, and they take care of that, but then they learn about like the big bad,
Right. Yeah.
So yeah, I thought that was a really interesting part of it.
I completely agree. And again, the cast is fantastic. Yeah, I don't have too much more on the notes here, other than like the similarities between the two movies. I don't know if because clearly the Wailing came out beforehand, but I feel like there's some of it must have influenced this movie at some point.
Yeah, it must have. So, is there anything you wanted to talk about for a spoiler section on this one?
Not really, because I'm still trying to figure out what the heck happened in the movie. But I'd be glad to hear what you say, so when I watch it again. I'm gonna watch it again, and I just want to see what you got.
Is your light like flashing or something over there?
I noticed that too. I've seen it on the screen, but I haven't seen it like here. I don't know what's going on.
Okay. Well, maybe it won't show up on the video, but I apologize to everybody if it does. If you don't notice it over there, then maybe it's just like the weird internet connection thing.
It could be.
But yeah, let's take a couple moments here to talk about some of the spoilers for this one. Once again, for everybody, like, please just go watch it. It's very, very good.
It's on Shudder.
I think it's worth seeing, not spoiled. So just skip ahead to, I don't know what's up next. News.
Mm-hmm.
Skip ahead to the news section, and we'll have a little bit to talk about there. But yeah, so what you find out is that there's like an ancient evil in this that is it's some piece of Korean folklore called an anima, which is like, what did they say? It's like an animal and an object and a spirit that have all wrapped into one thing.
Mm-hmm.
And they deal with a ton of this idea of like earth and water and wood and steel, and how the elements work together, and that's a big part of the beliefs too. So you can tell that the director really did a lot of research on how all of these beliefs actually like work together, and he does have to do some exposition dumps and some voiceovers and things like that, because you just know that, like, hey, without explaining these things to people, nobody's going to get it, right?
It's a thick broth trying to get through in 2 hours.
Yeah. So so it does serve as one of those movies that I think it gets better the more times you see it. But so what did you think about this ancient evil?
I like the design, like towards the end where is it a grandfather? The other gentleman there, the kind of older guy. He's like but like he ends up in like the grave with it when it's like fully formed.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. I really liked how it looked there. I thought that was really cool. I thought it was kind of similar. Again, the whole idea of like an Oni type demon, which I think is kind of that culture. I liked how that all came together at the end there.
Yeah. Yeah, it was a really interesting way to tell that story, and to incorporate the whole idea that, like, so the wealthy man, his family was apparently like involved with the Japanese, and it seems like they sort of betrayed their land in order to basically get wealthy during this time.
Right, and the one character brings that up about how that's when they first introduced the knowledge of the Japanese being involved, was through the older woman mentioning that man was there.
Yeah, and so they kind of are the evil guy that was like, they say that he was more fox than man or something. So he apparently, it seems, was setting all of this up, and was using sort of this ancient samurai guy that had killed like 10,000 people in battle,
Mhm.
and was using his spirit to be the one that's watching over this final metal rod that's in the ground here. So he's guarding this area to stop anybody from doing it. And he used the fox guy used the wealthy family's great grandfather or whatever, his grave, to sort of like cover this up. So so it's a very complex. There's so much going on that like it's, once again it can get a little bit confusing,
Right.
But I think that it's a really cool way they did all of it, and they really wrap up a lot of history into the lore that they're building here. So
Yeah, absolutely. I just need to watch it again, I think is the big thing. Sit down, quiet afternoon and
yeah,
watch it. Is I watched it. I liked it. I enjoyed the story. As you said, the world building was great. And I think I just missed a few plot points. Like I knew the Japanese man, Japanese, not the same guy. It's not the same guy, obviously, done. But like once they brought that up, I'm like, oh, okay, that's got to tie in. And then like I missed something else, and all of a sudden it was just kind of moved on, and I was just trying to play catch up after that point. But yeah,
yeah.
I enjoyed it. I want to watch it again for sure.
Highly recommend it. It was on a lot of people's top 10 lists for 2024. That's why I wanted to make sure I got this in. And so, yeah. All right. So that's enough for Exhuma and the Wailing. I was really happy with this double feature, though.
Yeah,
I loved both of these movies.
it's a great idea.
So thank you for the recommendation on that one, Dan.
You're welcome, buddy. Thank you for the recommendation on this one. I wish I had more of my head wrapped around it, but we'll get there.
Well, it's streaming on Shutter. Watch it again.
Mhm.
And yeah, hopefully you understand it a little bit better. But like I said, this is apparently a thing. There was at least one other person I had been talking to on Threads that they were like a little bit confused, and then watched it a second time and were like, "Oh, okay." It was impressive how much more I understood on second viewing than I did on first. And I think it's because like mentally I wasn't preparing. I wasn't prepared for the exposition, you
Right,
know?
right,
The world building, the lore building that was occurring in those first 5-10 minutes.
right.
Okay, let's talk about news.
Yes, sir.
All right, so the first thing I have is that Jon Bernthal has officially joined the cast of the Odyssey. Did you hear about that?
Did not. That's awesome.
Yeah, we got Jon Bernthal
That
in there. So
cast
that
is
cast
getting
is, yeah,
thick.
it is getting thick.
That's yeah, dude. That's gonna be such a good movie. I'm excited for that.
Yeah, I mean that cast alone. I wonder that movie's going to cost hundreds of millions of dollars if
Oh
all
yeah.
these actors are charging full price.
But then again, to work with Nolan, maybe they're just like, I'll take half or something.
Right. Yeah, that could be a thing too. So, but Jon Bernthal is one of, in my opinion, the best
Johnny
actors working today.
Johnny Bernthal is what they call
Yeah, Johnny boy.
him. I liked everything he's done. I liked him in The Walking Dead. I feel like him leaving that show hurt that show. And then I liked him in Fury. Liked him in Daredevil and The Punisher. Just everything he's done, really, I've enjoyed.
Yeah, he's great in The Bear.
I need to watch The Bear.
Yeah, The Bear is very good. It's also like one of the most like anxiety inducing shows I've ever seen.
Fun.
Yeah. It's like one of those like one episode at a time shows.
Okay.
Unless, you really feel like just driving yourself crazy and binging it. In
Nah,
which case by the end of it you'll be like you will have like lost hair and gained wrinkles.
I don't need any more of that.
But yeah. So, next piece, THR has reported that Robert Eggers is set to direct a new werewolf movie set in 13th century England called Werewolf, slated for Christmas 2026.
That's exciting.
That is exciting. That's like exactly what we talked about in our last episode.
Right.
We were I think we said something along the lines of like, yes, what we really want is for Robert Eggers to give the Wolfman the Nosferatu treatment.
Right.
But outside of that happening, what do we want, right?
Right. And that's it's gonna be like it's what he wants to do too. He said in an interview recently I saw he doesn't want to do a movie that like what do you say like up until people having phones. I think he said he doesn't want to do a movie after that.
Yeah, he said he doesn't want to photograph cars or cell phones.
That was it.
He said both of those things are things that he has no interest in being in his movies. He's gonna fully focus on folklore, it seems.
Yeah, which is awesome, and
Oh yeah.
pumped for that. I wish it was 2025 to come out, but they gotta make it still. So
They have a whole lot of making to do, yeah.
completely trust him, and I'm excited to see what happens with it.
Yeah, me too. I think this is probably going to turn into the definitive werewolf movie of our time.
It's gotta be werewolves, starring Frank Grillo.
Right
I
after
really I really should have watched that movie before just keep making fun of it for no reason. I haven't seen it, but I just have a bad feeling.
Well, we did see Wolfman,
It's true.
and that was a little bit disappointing. So we had high hopes of werewolf movies going into this year, and then it was like back to back disappointments in December and January. So
Maybe it'll
yeah,
pick back up.
it's tough. You know, one thing I wanted to make note of here too is that as I was looking into some of this, I noticed that the Wolfman in 2010 cost $150 million to make, and Nosferatu in 2024 cost $50 million.
That makes sense,
Isn't
doesn't
that
it?
crazy?
I wonder how much of that was Anthony Hopkins' contract? Probably a lot.
Maybe.
And
Uh,
the wolf's well done in that movie. The werewolf practical effects in that are good. It just sucks that they kind of like don't use them enough.
yeah, I need to see the director's cut of that movie because I hear it's better.
Oh, I didn't know there was
Because
one.
there's certain pieces like narratively that like when you're watching it, you're like, "Ah, I just feel like something's missing here, you know? And then there's, the CGI werewolf fight at the end that's like,
Chef's kiss.
okay, next up, physical media showcase. You got anything this week?
I have one thing this week,
Look at
actually.
you. You
I
got something
know.
this time.
All
I got
right.
one thing too, so
You
I'll
ready?
let you lead us off.
All right. I picked up the Smile
Oh, you did
2
it.
Steelbook. Yes, sir.
The Steelbook
Yes, sir. I know.
with
Nope, I shouldn't show that. But yeah,
young boy Nicholson.
I know, right? I kind of wish it wasn't him on the cover. I actually like when it first came out. I kind of waited on it because I didn't want him on the cover. I was like, oh, he whatever, but it works, and
That scene with him though, when he like stands up from the table and like walks up to her while she's
so
on
good.
stage, that is a very good scene with him.
Yeah, so I think I've mentioned it on the show before. I love this movie. I know I didn't pick it as my favorite horror movie of 2024, but it's up there. And I'll be watching it many more times. So that's what I got.
Awesome. Well, that's a really cool one. So I got a brand new 4K edition of something. Can you guess what it is?
7.
It is 7.
I knew that was coming out, so it was a good educated guess. God, I love that movie. I need to. I was talking to Holly the other day, and she mentioned how she hasn't seen it. I'm like, that's a perfect example or reason. I mean, to say to watch it.
Yep.
What's in the? Oh, no, I won't say it.
So I will say that
That's
with
cool.
this one, it's I watched it already. It is absolutely beautiful in 4K.
Very cool.
I will also add that the disc, the way it sits in here, it's in like just it's like one of those just like it sits in a folder and like flops out of between two pieces of cardboard.
Hate
And I
that.
knew that going in, and it is still worse than I thought it would be.
I hate that with all my heart.
Yeah, everybody's complaining about it. So if you're watching this, the person that made that, I hate you.
Yeah, it's a bad choice.
I'll show it to you. You can see it right over here. See right there? That's where the disc is sitting in between these two pieces of cardboard right there.
Terrible idea.
Terrible, terrible, terrible idea. And like I said, it is somehow worse than I expected it to be, knowing that it was going to be just that going in, because it's kind of difficult to get out of it.
Yeah. The
And
only
so
movie,
I expect I'll be watching the digital version of this a lot just because I'm afraid of taking that version out.
the only movie I have that's similar to that is probably the the DVD copy of There Will Be Blood from way back in the day. It was a similar situation where a couple times I went to get off my shelf and just like flung it across the room.
Well, this luckily has like the folders, the folding things that like, so it's not going to fall out of it like that. But yeah, so that's what I have. I watched it. It's great. I watched some deleted scenes and whatnot. Those were cool. I could do for more special features. I would have loved an interview with David Fincher, but
Right.
I don't have that. The Panic Room 4K just, I'm not sure if it's out yet, but it's up for sale at the very least. So that is something I may get after this as well. But one thing I wanted to add too is that I actually have an extra digital code for this. So anybody that's watching, follow me on social media on Threads, because I will be doing a giveaway of the digital version of this pretty soon here. I just have to work out the complexities of doing a giveaway on
That's cool.
social media and figure out how I'm doing that. But I will be giving away that digital code to somebody.
Yeah, look at you.
So follow me on there and keep an eye out for that.
Worth it just for that movie.
Yeah. All right. So final thing I have is we're launching our February schedule today. So coming up in February, on February 4th, we have our companion review. So that's the Sophie Thatcher,
Jack
Quaid movie there. Week after that, on February 11th, we have our Valentine's Day special where we're doing Hard Eyes and My Bloody Valentine. And we'll be doing the original one.
OG.
Yep. And on the 18th, we're going to do Captain America Brave New World. And that is there to prove that Dan and I do indeed watch movies that aren't horror movies every now and then. But then the week after that, we're getting back into horror with a review of The Monkey.
I know. I'm excited for both. Like, Companion wasn't on my radar until you sent me that trailer, and it's really shot up my list, and I'm excited to see it.
It looks really good, right?
It does.
Where he's like hacked his girlfriend robot into killing people.
Right. And I just saw
she doesn't seem to know she's doing it.
Right. And I just saw Sophie Thatcher in Heretic, and I thought she was great in that. So it's nice to get like a kind of a quick fire, like 2 straight movies with an actor and actress that I like. So that's exciting.
If this is good, then we will have 3 big horror movies out of her, because we'll have both of those. But then we've also got, she was in Boogeyman with David Dastmalchian.
David Dastmalchian from Late Night with the Devil and Suicide Squad and Last Voyage. The Dark Knight, The Last Voyage of the Dementor. He's all over the place.
The Last Voyage of the Dementor?
Yep.
Is that a Harry Potter spinoff?
Yep, it is. It's not Demeter anymore. It's Dementor. Darn it. I knew I said that weird.
That's okay. So that's all we got for this week, everybody. So thank you so much for joining us. Please subscribe on YouTube, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, wherever you're watching, wherever you're listening. Follow me on Threads, Instagram, and Blue Sky. It's at Bark Night Podcast. And we will see you next week for our review of Companion.